We pulling?
Hey, I'm Zax, and here's our guide to the Silken Court, the second to last boss in Nerubar Palace. This guide is brought to you by Wowhead and their brand new raid cheat sheets, which we'll tell you more about right after the boss. Also, big thank you to our supporters on Patreon. Hope you'll enjoy all the Patreon exclusive content we've got coming out this tier, like mythic guides and more. Alright, so the Silken Court is Dumb and Dumber over here. We'll call the skinny one the caster boss and this other guy the melee boss. They have 3 phases with a couple intermissions in between them. You fight both bosses at the same time, so it's mostly a 2-target cleave fight, and you'll want a bloodlust on pull. But before you pull, you need to assign 2 players to be in charge of the tether mechanic of the fight, and you should put a mark on them so they're easy to see. Ideally, they are mobile range DPS or healers, and on heroic, you actually need to assign 2 pairs of 2 players for this, so 4 total. This assignment is for the most important mechanic in phase 1, and here's what they need to do. When a bunch of these swirlies spawn on the ground, everyone needs to dodge them and then stay out of the webs they leave on the ground. And then the assigned players need to move together next to one of the webs and wait. Then when the melee boss gets to around 90 energy, they both need to move into the web, and one of them needs to move into the little bubble in the middle of the web to explode it, which creates a tether between the 2 players. Then they need to stay close enough to each other to not break the tether, shown by this big circle around them. And finally, when the melee boss gets to full energy and starts casting this charge across the room, one of the players needs to move to the other side of the charge to stretch the tether across the charge path. So when the boss charges, the tether stops him and prevents him from hitting the wall, which would do an insane amount of raid-wide damage and probably cause a wipe. As a little bonus, the boss takes double damage for a few seconds if you stop the charge. But you have to do all this twice in the phase before it's over, and on heroic, you need the charge to go through 2 different tethers to stop it, which is why you need 2 pairs of 2 players to handle all that. It's definitely a little complicated, but if you can manage the charge, everything else in the phase is a lot simpler. The bosses share health, so it doesn't matter which one you hit, and the tanks should try to keep them stacked as much as possible for cleave damage. But the caster boss can't be moved, and he jumps around randomly, so they can't be stacked 100% of the time. The tanks also have to taunt swap on the melee boss after every time he casts Piercing Strike, because it does a ton of physical damage and increases damage taken from the following Piercing Strike. And the tank that has aggro on the caster boss has to be dispelled pretty often because she spam casts Poison Bolt on them, which does magic damage and applies a heavy dot. When everyone gets this green circle around them, you need to spread out so you're not in each other's circles before they explode after a couple seconds. When the melee boss spawns these adds, they fixate random players and melee them, giving them stacks of a damage taken increase. So the fixated players need to try to drag the adds through the melee boss so they can get slowed and cleaved down by everyone. On heroic, the adds have a big damage reduction buff that goes away over time, so they just take a little longer to kill. And when the melee boss casts this big cone on the ground, everyone needs to quickly move out of it before the cast finishes and it impales anyone it hits, doing a ton of damage to the player and stunning them until the impaling spike is destroyed by other people. Once the caster boss gets to full energy after a couple minutes, the first intermission starts, where the melee boss hides and the caster boss goes to the middle of the room, gets a big shield, and starts a long channel. This channel does ramping raid-wide damage and spawns these cones all around the boss, which everyone has to avoid being in when they explode after a few seconds. The timing of the cones can be a little tricky because the whole room fills up before they start exploding, but just stand in a newer cone until an older one explodes and then move into the safe spot it leaves behind. Once the boss's shield is broken, phase 2 starts, where the melee boss comes back and both bosses get some new abilities. The only thing that changes for the melee boss is that he doesn't do the charge in this phase, but now instead he has the new main mechanic of the phase. At some point, he puts a dispellable debuff, Stinging Swarm, on 3 random players, and when this debuff gets dispelled, it jumps to the closest player or the caster boss if she's the closest. And the goal with these debuffs is to get them all onto the caster. Importantly, getting the 3rd stack of the debuff onto her when she gets to full energy and starts her big raid wiping cast, Cataclysmic Entropy. When she gets the 3rd stack, it interrupts the cast, preventing the wipe. The way we recommend making this happen is by having the 3 players with the debuff, which you can see based on this swirly purple effect around them, go stand in a triangle around the caster boss while everyone else gets away from them. And then when the big cast starts, quickly dispel all 3 of them and GG. You could even use mass dispel from a priest to make it real easy. Each dispel also does some raid-wide damage, so the healers will need to get everyone topped beforehand. So that's the new main mechanic. As for the caster boss, her abilities are all new but simple. The cast she spams at the tank is now Void Bolt, but it does the same thing, just needs a dispel sometimes. She has a random cone on the ground for everyone to dodge before it explodes. And she casts a raid-wide pull-in that also tethers random players together, followed immediately by a big explosion in a circle around her that everyone has to quickly run out of. You don't actually need the tethers for anything in this phase, so just make sure to run away from your partners and break the tethers to remove the dot it puts on you. Once the melee boss gets to full energy after another couple minutes, the second intermission starts where the caster boss hides and the melee boss goes to the middle, gets a big shield, and starts a long channel. Very similar to the first intermission. But now instead of cones on the ground, a bunch of these rings spawn around the room that everyone has to avoid being in when they explode, or else they take a bunch of damage and get impaled and have to be broken out. Once the boss's shield is broken, phase 3 starts where the caster boss comes back and things get real. This phase has both of the main mechanics from phase 1 and 2. So the melee boss does the charge again, and he puts out those debuffs that you have to transfer to the caster boss at the right time. And to make things even more complicated, the only way to get tethers for the charge is from the raid-wide pull-in the caster boss does, which just tethers random people together, so you can't really just rely on the assigned people from phase 1 to handle it. There will probably be some add-on or weak aura thing that tells you who should keep their tether, but otherwise, we recommend all the ranged and healers keep their tethers and use them for the charge, unless the raid leader calls for specific people to keep their tether and then everyone else can break them to prevent some dot damage. And don't forget, 2 tethers are needed on heroic. As for the other mechanics of phase 3, the melee boss doesn't spawn adds anymore and he doesn't have a frontal. Instead, he spawns rings on the ground for everyone to dodge, like in the second intermission, and he has a big raid-wide damage channel for the healers to watch out for. And that's pretty much it. For our recaps this tier, we're excited to introduce the new Wowhead cheat sheets, a quick and easy way to get all of the key info for every boss in Nerubar Palace, including concise strategies, key assignments, and any pro tips you might need. So check out the cheat sheet link in the description. Thanks again to our supporters on Patreon. We've got a ton of Patreon exclusive content coming this tier, like extended heroic guides, mythic guides, and a bunch more. So check out that link below. See you next time.